terribly devastating situation in Victoria. This has been another heartbreaking day for Victorians, which means it's a heartbreaking day for all Australians. I know that across Victoria, many today, frankly, would have reached breaking point, trying to come to terms with what has happened in their state, what it means for them, what it means for their family, what it means for their businesses. They've worked so hard for their jobs, for their livelihoods, for the care of their children and their education. It's heartbreaking. This pandemic, this virus, is taking a heavy toll. And now is the time, as it has been throughout this pandemic, that we continue to provide support to one another, that we look out for each other, that we offer an elbow of support. Wish it was a hug, but we know that's not going to help. But that offer of support, being there for each other at this time, is incredibly important. If you've got friends in Victoria, call them, cheer them up, encourage them, let them know you're there for them if you're in a state that is in a much better situation, which thankfully all other states and territories are. Offer whatever support you can. We've asked so much of Australians over these many months, and we've asked even more of Victorians, and now we're asking through the Victorian Premier even more. We know that we have to help them push through because Australia's future depends on these weeks and months ahead. So today, I'm here to do nothing more than encourage people. You've heard what the announcements are from the Victorian Premier. You've heard what the additional restrictions are that the Victorian government has decided to put in place with the additional workforce measures that have been announced today. And I expect there will be some frustration and some further clarity that will be needed to be provided in the days ahead on the list that have been provided by the Victorian government today. And we will need to work through that together. The Commonwealth Government similarly will have to do that on important issues like childcare and the like, and we're doing that right now. But right now, here today, it is a matter of just helping each other absorb what is another devastating blow. As we work to come to terms with how we respond to the list which has been provided today, and I do want to thank Premier Andrews over the weekend in particular. There's been a lot of consultation that's been going on as our agencies and departments, particularly the economic departments, the industry department and so on, Prime Minister and Cabinet have been working with the Victorian Government to provide our input as to where they went to from here. And the Victorian Government has considered all that and sent out the list that they have today. But we will need some further clarity on a number of matters, and I'm sure that will be forthcoming. The Commonwealth Government has been providing considerable support to Victoria, as the Treasurer said this morning, some $14 billion of support already there. The additional mental health support advised by the Health Minister yesterday, particularly important at this time. The JobKeeper program, the Job Seeker program is all there and available now. Businesses affected by today's announcements that previously may not have been on JobKeeper can apply now based on the prospective impact of these announcements on their business in the months ahead. They can apply for JobKeeper now. People can apply who are affected potentially by loss of employment can apply for Job Seeker now. And those payments run at their current level, as you know, out till the end of September, which is beyond even the period of restrictions that the Premier has announced, and that will continue. Mutual obligation arrangements for Job Seeker for Victoria have been suspended in the way that they had done previously to ensure that people can continue to access those payments. Now, last week I indicated to you that we were working on a plan and consulting and discussing these issues of pandemic leave, and we've been able to come to a conclusion on that today, which I was awaiting the Premier's press conference before announcing. And so for that reason, that explains the lateness of the hour as to why we're here making those announcements this afternoon. What we will be doing is establishing a pandemic leave disaster payment. Earlier this year, when we were confronting the bushfires, we made a number of additional disaster payments particularly for children and families affected by bushfires. What we're dealing with here is a disaster, and we need to respond on the basis of the way we provide support in the midst of disasters. This pandemic is a disaster, and we need a disaster payment when it comes for people who have to isolate for a period of 14 days through no fault of their own, regardless of what their job they're in and employment they're in. They need that support. Now, those who are already receiving JobSeeker, they're already getting income support. Those who are already getting JobKeeper are already receiving income support if they're in those circumstances. So what we'll be putting in place is for those who have no more sick leave available to them, that they will be eligible for a $1,500 payment for the fortnight. That payment will be modelled on exactly the same set of criteria that the Victorian government has put in place. Those payments are principally made to those who are on short-term visas, so those who are not residents of Australia, permanent residents or citizens of Australia, who otherwise wouldn't have accessed Commonwealth payments. The Victorian government will continue to provide that support. We will make sure that everyone else who finds themselves in this situation and they don't have that leave available to them through their sick leave because it's been exhausted will get a $1,500 payment for that fortnight. That payment will be made in the same way that disaster recovery repayments are made. People would only need to ring the number 180-2266, I'm advised, from Wednesday, and we'll be able to update that between now and then if there are any changes to that time frame, and they'll be able to make their application over the phone, which they can do for other disaster-type payments, and that should be turned around fairly quickly. That means that those who need to self-isolate as a result of an instruction by a public health officer, there is no economic reason for you to go to work. We are also encouraging the Victorian government to ensure that there are appropriate penalties in place for those who do break those public health notices and they're told to self-isolate and do go to work. They're putting their workmates at risk, they're putting their employer's business at risk, they're putting the broader health at risk. But today is not today for those types of instructions. Today is a day for letting Victorians know that we are there to support you. And we will be there to support you with a $1,500 payment in the same way that others receive JobKeeper, that if you're put in that situation, you can have that support for that 2-week period. So that has gone through the Expenditure Review Committee of Cabinet today after formulating this proposal over recent days, and we're very pleased to be able to do that. The cost for this obviously be shared on the basis that it is currently being done between payments by the Commonwealth and the state. The state will be proposing, and I've already discussed this with the Premier, will continue to pick up the costs for those to short-term visa holders, and the Commonwealth will pick up the costs for Australian residents and citizens as a result of this payment. People can actually access the payment multiple times if, unfortunately, they're in a position where they have to self-isolate as a direct requirement on multiple times, and hopefully that won't be too often, and hopefully people will only have to go through that on the single occasion, but we know that isn't always the case. So that's where we've got to today. And before I hand you over to Professor Kelly, I just want to assure Victorians again that I know it's a really tough day for you, and I know you've had some really heartbreaking news. The idea that in this country we'd be living at a time where there would be a night curfew on an entire city of the size of Melbourne was unthinkable. But frankly, as we've moved through this pandemic, we've had to deal with a lot of unthinkable things. But I tell you what, we will deal with it. Victorians, I know, are up to it. I know they will support each other. And I know that other Australians will support Victorians. I just want all Victorians to know that here, your Australian government will continue to stand with you with all the support we can provide, because you will get through this and we will get through it together once again.